Hey everyone, and welcome to this remade German signalling guide, which is designed to replace the guide that I first recorded for this channel around 3.5 years ago. Things have come a long way since the first guide that I made with regards to my knowledge of German signals and safety systems, and also since that time I've invested in a new, much more powerful PC and a considerably improved microphone. And so the purpose of this video is to create a much more detailed guide to German signals and safety systems, including signals within Austria, with the aim of producing this video to a much higher standard than was previously possible. Whilst I am recording this video within Train Simulator, due to the variety of routes and trains available, as well as the ease of setting up the various different camera shots, the information contained within this video also applies to German routes which are available within Train Sim World, which are currently the Ruhr-Sieg Nord route and the Leipzig S-Bahn route. We're going to start out in this video by looking at the various different trackside signs that you will need to observe and interact with as the driver, before moving on to the signals and safety systems. There are two primary signalling systems that we will be looking at. PZB, which, if I can pronounce this correctly, stands for Punktförmige Zugbeeinflussung, and this is in use in both Germany and Austria within Train Simulator. In real life, PZB is also used in Slovenia, Croatia, Romania, Israel, 2 routes in Hungary, and 1 route in Canada. The other signalling system that we will be looking at in this video is Lzb, which stands for Linienzugbeeinflussung, and this system is used only on German routes within Train Simulator as far as I'm aware, but it's also used in real life on certain Austrian routes, along with Spanish routes. After going over the basic signalling theory, we will then move on to some driving scenarios so I can demonstrate how to operate the train under different conditions following different signal aspects, and hopefully these driving scenarios will help to bring the Lzb and PZB theory to life in a more practical way so you can actually see it in its application. If you can master these systems, it does make for quite a rewarding driving experience within the simulator. This guide is by no means exhaustive, there is always more to learn, and there are certain signs or situations that you may encounter as a driver in real life that I have not covered in this video, but I do believe and certainly hope that this video will become the most comprehensive English guide to German and Austrian signals to be found anywhere on YouTube. Let's now first take a look at the various trackside signs that you will encounter when driving on German or Austrian routes. There are more signs in reality than I have included here, but I have tried to include all of the important signs that you will need to pay attention to as a driver. Speed posts are white square boards with black numbers written on them. The number represents the speed limit divided by 10, so for example a speed post with the number 16 means a speed limit of 160 km per hour. All speed limits within Germany and Austria, along with all of the rest of Europe except the UK, are measured in kilometers per hour. When you see a speed board, just times the number written on the post by 10, and that will give you the current speed limits. If there could be confusion about which track a speed post is associated with, then you will see a small arrow placed above the sign to indicate which track the speed restriction applies to. Speed posts in Austria are also square-shaped, but with a red border and with the numbers also written in red. Speed limit warning posts are often downward pointing triangles, but it is possible that they may also point in an upwards direction. These signs are coloured orange with the number written in, warning of an upcoming reduction in the speed limit. These posts are often placed 1 kilometre or so from the speed change, but the distance does vary depending upon how drastic the speed change is. At some speed warnings there will be an active PZB magnet which you will have to acknowledge, and I'll give you a bit more information on this later on in the video. Speed warning posts in Austria are also triangular shaped and take on a similar style to the speed limit posts in that they have a red border on the outside and the numbers are coloured red. Before signals you may well encounter distance marker posts, which are tall rectangular boards with diagonal black stripes on them. These represent the distance to an upcoming signal. The post with 3 stripes is placed 250 metres before the signal. The post with 2 stripes is placed 175 metres before the signal. And the final post with 1 stripe is placed 100 metres before the signal. There are also distance markers which are placed every 200 metres along the track, which actually measure the distance from a given location. I've always called these kilometre posts within my route learning videos, but someone recently told me that they're called hectometer posts, so I'm not quite sure why that is. So these are particularly useful as landmarks when you're driving without the HUD, and the number on the post depends upon where the distance is being measured from. There are 3 markers representing neutral sections where you need to switch off the main switch of the locomotive when running on electrified routes. The first is a blue diamond board with 2 white dots, which is usually placed at half the braking distance to the second marker. This first marker indicates that you are to expect a neutral section ahead, so prepare to switch off the main switch. This is particularly pertinent to locos within Train Simulator created by virtual railroads, where neutral section functionality has been implemented. The second post is a diamond board which looks a bit like a straight-faced emoticon with 2 white dots and a white horizontal line below it. This sign indicates that you need to turn off the main switch at this point. The main switch should then remain off until you pass the third sign, which is another diamond board, this time with the symbol in the form of a sort of digitalized U-shape. This indicates that you have now passed the neutral section and can turn the main switch back on. A P sign is the equivalent of a whistle board. The P stands for the German word Pfeife, and so you should sound the train horn when you pass one of these signs. An H sign, which you will see in station platforms, is a halt sign, indicating the position where you should stop your train. Some stations have an H sign with a length indication below it, indicating different stopping positions depending upon the length of the train that you are driving. Some H signs may have a small arrow, like with the speed signs, indicating which track the H sign applies to. A chessboard sign indicates that a signal which would normally be placed in this position has been placed at an alternative location, potentially further away from the track or on the other side of the track. Now that we've had a look at trackside signs, let's take a look at the various signal aspects you may encounter. We will start with German signal aspects, looking at the 3 primary types of signal in use. Whilst this is a slightly simplified version of the signal types found in reality, this should cover pretty much everything that you need to know within Train Simulator and Train Sim World. Mainline signals are divided into 2 types, which are main signals and distance signals. The gap between 2 main signals is known as a signal block. Green main signals indicates that you are cleared to proceed at the current line speed or Vmax of your train, with Vmax being maximum velocity, whichever of the 2 numbers is lower, and the signal block ahead is clear. If you encounter a main signal showing a green over yellow aspect, this indicates that you must proceed at a reduced speed, which is 40 km per hour unless indicated otherwise on the signal. Red or double red signal aspects indicate that you must stop at this signal as the signal section ahead is not clear. A main signal aspect which has a number on it in white indicates that you can proceed at the speed limit indicated by that number. So, for example, if you encounter a signal with the number 8 on it, this means that you can proceed past this signal at a speed of no greater than 80 km per hour. Distance signals are warning signals of what to expect at the next main signal, and the lights are placed at a diagonal angle. Most distance signals are also shaped in a diagonal way, but it is possible that some distance signals may look a bit more like main signals in their shape. The important distinguishing feature is that the lights on a distance signal are always placed at a diagonal angle. If the distance signal has a white light indicating on it, this white light indicates that it is closer to the next main signal than usual, and this is especially important to bear in mind when driving with PZB. A double green aspect on a distance signal indicates that the next main signal is clear, so you can continue to proceed at line speed or the Vmax of your train. A green and yellow distance signal with a green light in the top right and a yellow light in the bottom left indicates that you are to expect to proceed at a reduced speed at the next signal, which is 40 km per hour, unless indicated otherwise by a number on the distance signal. A distance signal displaying 2 yellow lights indicates that you should expect to stop at the next main signal, as it is currently displaying a red stop aspect. You may find that sometimes a distance signal is placed on the same post as a main signal. In this case, what you need to do is obey the current aspect on the main signal and follow the aspect which is on the distance signal for what's going to happen at the following main signal. A signal displaying a flashing green aspect indicates that you are cleared to proceed at line speed, but to expect a speed reduction at the next signal. In this case, you can see a number 5 indicated, so you would have to slow down to 50 km per hour by the time that you reach the next signal. On some routes, you may find that older semaphore signals are in use. The light patterns on these signals at night time are identical to the way that modern colour light signals look. Let's just take a quick look at the differing aspects that you will find on semaphore signals. Main signals have 2 semaphore arms on them. If the upper arm is pointing upwards at a diagonal angle and the lower arm is pointing upwards vertically, then this indicates a clear aspect and you can proceed at line speed or the Vmax of your train. If both arms of a main signal are pointing upwards at a diagonal angle, this indicates you are cleared to proceed at a reduced speed, which is 40 km per hour unless indicated otherwise. If the upper arm of a main signal is pointing to the right in a horizontal direction and the lower arm is pointing upwards in a vertical direction, then this is a stop signal. You cannot proceed until the signal has cleared, or you have permission to do so from the signaller. Distant semaphore signals utilize a yellow disc and yellow arm to indicate the various signal aspects to warn what to expect at the next main signal. A distance signal where the yellow disc is not visible and the yellow arm is pointing vertically downwards indicates that you can expect a clear proceed aspect at the next main signal. At night time, you would perceive this as 2 diagonal green lights. If the yellow disc on the distance signal is showing and the yellow arm is pointing downwards in a diagonal direction, this indicates that you should expect a reduced speed at the next main signal. At night time, this will be perceived as a green light in the upper right and a yellow light in the bottom left. If the yellow disc is visible and the yellow arm is pointing downwards in a vertical direction, this indicates that you should expect a red stop aspect at the next main signal. At night time, this will be perceived as 2 diagonal yellow lights. Shunt signals are primarily used in yards or around railway stations. There are two aspects which shunt signals can display. Two horizontal red lights indicates that you are not cleared to proceed until you are given an indication otherwise. Two diagonal white lights indicates that you are cleared to proceed away from this shunt signal, driving by sight at a speed of no greater than 40 km per hour. Before moving on to look at the PZB theory, let's first take a look at the signal aspects that you may encounter when driving on Austrian routes. I would like to note at this point that Austria does also use semaphore signals on certain routes, like in Germany, but I'm not actually sure which Austrian routes they may be found on within Train Simulator, so I'm not covering Austrian semaphore signals in this video. Whilst some signal aspects in Austria are very similar, there are a few key differences, not least that many of the speed restrictions are actually set by the signal aspect, rather than a number indication being displayed by the signal. There are both historic main signals, which are dated from pre-1980, and modern main signals, which contain many more lights than the historic ones. A single green light indicates a clear or proceed aspect, so you may drive at line speed or the Vmax of your train, whichever is lower. A green over yellow light indicates that you may proceed at a speed of no faster than 40 km per hour. A single red light indicates a stop signal. You may not proceed from this signal without permission to do so, or until the signal has cleared, whichever one happens to be the case. A double green light, which is only available on the modern signals in Austria, indicates that you may proceed at a speed of no greater than 60 km per hour. Distance signals in Austria are smaller than main signals, and they are square-shaped. A clear or proceed distance signal aspect is indicated by two diagonal green lights at the bottom of the signal. A distance signal with two diagonal green lights at the bottom and a yellow light in the top left indicates a reduced speed of 60 km per hour at the next main signal. If you encounter a distance signal with two horizontal yellow lights at the top and a green light in the bottom left, this indicates a reduced speed of 40 km per hour at the next main signal. Distance signals with two horizontal yellow lights at the top indicates to expect a red stop aspect at the next main signal. Like with German signals, you may find a combined main and distance signal on the same post, whereby you should follow the aspect of the main signal and look at the distance signal aspect to be aware of what aspect will be displayed at the following main signal. There are also a number of signal repeaters used in Austria, placed where the visibility to the next main signal is insufficient for the driver to see. A repeater with a vertical white line in the bottom left and a diagonal line pointing to the top right indicates that the main signal ahead is displaying a clear proceed aspect. A repeater with a vertical white line in the bottom left and a diagonal white line pointing towards the bottom right indicates that the next main signal is displaying a restricted speed aspect. A repeater with a vertical white line in the bottom left and a horizontal white line pointing towards the right indicates that the next signal is displaying a danger stop aspect. If the repeater is coloured yellow with yellow lines and a yellow border around it, then this indicates that the repeater has a 1000 Hz PZB magnet attached to it, and we'll go a bit more into that a little bit later on. Austrian shunt signals utilise two white horizontal lights to indicate a stop signal and two diagonal white lights to indicate a proceed aspect. Both main and distance signals are protected by PZB magnets. There are three types of PZB magnets depending upon their distance away from the main signal. How you need to respond when encountering an active PZB magnet depends on the type of train that you are driving and its maximum permitted speed. I will now take you through the different PZB modes and explain the various speed limits that you will have to follow. I'm also going to take you into the cab of a locomotive to explain how to set up the various safety systems before bringing this to life with several different driving scenarios. The first of the three types of PZB magnet is the 1000 Hertz magnet, which is placed at the distance signal and can be at varying distances from the main signal ahead. The next magnet is the 500 Hertz magnet, which is usually placed at around a distance of 250 meters from the main signal. The final magnet is placed at the main signal itself and is known as the 2000 Hertz magnet. If we now look into the cab of the Virtual Railroads BR101, let's just take a quick look at the PZB controls before continuing to explain how to approach cautionary signals. So there are three types of PZB mode, which indicate the speed limits that you will have to follow when approaching cautionary signals. Passenger trains use PZB O mode, with the O standing for Obere, which when active will illuminate the 85 lamp that you can see here on the dashboard. The 85 indicates the speed that you will need to reduce to when passing a cautionary signal. To the left of the cab, you can see the PZB controls. To turn on PZB with most default trains, you press Ctrl and numpad enter, but with some trains the controls to turn on PZB are slightly different, especially with Virtual Railroads locomotives, so I do recommend checking the manual of the particular type of train that you are driving. So with the PZB controls here that you can see to the left of the cab, there are three buttons that we need to deal with. The first one, which is on the right, is the PZB Acknowledge button, which is operated by page down on the keyboard. PZB Free or Release is the middle button, which is operated by the end key on the keyboard. The final button is PZB Override, which is the button on the left there, and is operated by the delete key on the keyboard. So with our passenger train in PZB O mode, as we pass a cautionary distance signal indicating that the main signal is displaying a red stop aspect, we have to press the PZB Acknowledge key within 4 seconds, or the emergency brakes will be applied. Once we have pressed the Acknowledge key, then the 1000 Hertz lamp in the cab will illuminate, indicating that we have just passed and acknowledged an active 1000 Hertz magnet. From this point, we now have just 23 seconds to reduce our speed to below 85 km per hour, or the emergency brakes will be applied. If you're travelling at a speed as high as 160 km per hour, this could require some pretty hard braking. So when travelling at such a speed, I generally recommend to keep a close eye on the signals, and in fact begin braking as soon as you see the cautionary signal aspect ahead, before you have passed it or acknowledged the active PZB magnet. Once you have travelled 700 meters past the cautionary signal and active 1000 Hertz magnet, the 1000 Hertz lamp will go out in the cab. If you can now see the main signal ahead and see that it is now displaying a clear aspect, you may at this point press the PZB Free or Release key and begin to accelerate once again. You should aim to press this before you reach the 500 Hertz magnet, as long as the signal is clear. If you do press the release key and the signal is not clear, then the emergency brakes will be applied upon reaching the 500 Hertz magnet. If the signal is not clear, then you must continue to slow down, so that you are not travelling any faster than 65 km per hour by the time you pass the 500 Hertz magnet, or the emergency brakes will then be applied. As you pass over this magnet, the 500 Hertz lamp will illuminate in the train cab, but you do not need to acknowledge this magnet. Only 1000 Hertz magnets need acknowledging. Once you've passed the 500 Hertz magnet, you must then decelerate to a further speed restriction of 45 km per hour within the next 153 meters, or again the emergency brakes will be applied. Once down to 45 km per hour, you can then safely bring the train to a stop in front of the red signal. At the main signal is the 2000 Hertz magnet, which will always bring a train to a stop if the train passes the signal whilst at danger. If the signal clears after you've passed the 500 Hertz magnet but before you've stopped the train, you cannot release from speed monitoring and must continue at a speed of no greater than 45 km per hour. This is why if you notice the signal is clear before you have reached the 500 Hertz magnet, you should aim to release from PZB monitoring at this time to prevent these further speed restrictions from being imposed. After passing the cleared signal at 45 km per hour, restricted monitoring will continue until you have travelled 250 meters past this signal, at which point you may then accelerate back up towards line speed. If you have stopped at a red signal which isn't clearing, you can request permission to pass the signal from the signaller by pressing the Tab key on the keyboard. If permission is then granted, you may pull away and move past the red signal while pressing and holding the PZB override key. This will allow you to move past the active 2000 Hz magnet without an emergency brake application. But if you have to do this, you will now be limited to a speed of just 40 km per hour until you have either travelled 2 km or passed a clear signal, whichever comes first, at which point you then may press the PZB release or free key and accelerate back up to line speed. I now just want to jump into the first of the driving scenarios demonstrating how to approach a red signal. The screenshots that you've just seen as I was explaining how to approach a red signal in a Type O train are from this scenario here on the Cologne to Koblenz route, and I've just paused it temporarily as we're approaching the cautionary distance signal. As you can see, we're currently travelling at 160 km per hour, which is the line speed, and if I now unpause it, what I'm going to do now is cut back the power as I can see the cautionary signal ahead. I'm going to start braking before we reach the signal to try and prevent having to brake too hard once we've passed the signal. So as we now reach the signal here, I'm now going to press the PZB acknowledge key. As you can see, the 1000 Hz lamp has come on and the 85 lamp is flashing, which indicates that we are now under restricted monitoring. So I'm now trying to bring our speed down under 85 km per hour, which I've now done in less than 23 seconds. I'm now releasing the brakes momentarily just to see if I can see the signal ahead. I can see the signal ahead and I can see that it hasn't cleared, so now the 1000 Hz lamp has extinguished. I can't press the PZB free key because if I was to do so then the emergency brakes would be applied. I've now slowed down to below 65 km per hour before we reach the 500 Hz magnet just here. And we're now approaching the 500 Hz magnet, so I'm now going to slow down as I know I've only got 153 meters in which to slow to below 45 km per hour. I've now met all of the speed restrictions when approaching the red signal, and so I can now just gently bring the train to a stop here in front of the signal. And so we've now successfully stopped at a red signal following all of the PZB speed restrictions. Let's now take a look at the speed restrictions for a Type M train. If you were driving a Type M train with the M standing for Mittlere, then instead of the 85 lamp illuminating on the dashboard, you would be using the 70 lamp. Type M trains are usually faster freight trains, and the speed limits for a Type M train approaching a red signal are as follows. Whereas Type O trains are limited to 160 km per hour under PZB, Type M trains are limited to 120 km per hour. Upon passing an active 1000 Hz magnet, you then have 26 seconds to slow to a speed of below 70 km per hour. If the signal ahead is still not clear, then you should slow to be travelling no faster than 50 km per hour by the time that you reach the active 500 Hz magnet. Upon passing the active 500 Hertz magnet, you now have to slow to below 35 km per hour within the next 153 meters, and then at this point you can safely draw up to the stop signal. Let's now jump into the second of our driving scenarios from the cab of a BR185 locomotive, currently travelling at the Vmax of 120 km per hour for a Type M train. So we're back on the Cologne to Koblenz route, and we're going to be approaching the same signal as before, this time demonstrating what you need to do in a Type M train when approaching a red signal. So if I now unpause the scenario at this point, you can see the cautionary signal which is coming up just ahead. So I'm now going to cut the power back to idle, but the brakes on this train are pretty good, so I'm not going to brake too much before we approach the cautionary signal here. I do now have the brakes on. Let's now acknowledge the PZB, and at this point we have 26 seconds at which to get to below a speed of 70 km per hour. Our speed's coming off quite nicely here, so now down to 80 km per hour, 75, and we're now down to 70. So at this point I'm just going to release the brakes momentarily and just have a look to see if I can see the signal ahead. I can see it. I can see that it's still displaying a red aspect, so I'm not going to be able to press the PZB free key when approaching this signal. The 1000 Hz lamp has now gone out, so if the signal did clear at this point, then it would be a great time at which to press the PZB free so as to prevent further speed restrictions from being enforced. I've now brought our speed down to 50 km per hour, as that's the maximum speed limit for crossing the 500 Hz magnet, which will be coming up in a moment. I can just see the magnet now on the right of the track. So I'm going to brake a bit more now because I know I've got only 153 meters at which to get to below a speed of 35 km per hour. So we're now down below 35 km per hour, and at this point we can now safely draw up to the stop signal, and I can be sure that we're not going to get any PZB brake interventions at this point. And so we're now stopping nicely in front of the red signal here. So now we've had a look at a Type O and a Type M train. Let's consider the speed limits now for a Type U train. So I'm going to go through the speed limits like I have done with the previous two train types, and then we'll jump into a Type U driving scenario, again stopping at this same signal on the Cologne to Koblenz route. The final train type is Type U, with the U standing for Unterer. This mode is used for slower speed freight trains, and the 55 lamp on the dashboard will be used. The speed limits for a Type U train are as follows. The maximum permitted speed is 100 km per hour. Upon passing an active 1000 Hz magnet, you then have 34 seconds to slow to a speed of 55 km per hour or less. If the signal ahead is still not clear, you should then slow to a speed of no faster than 40 km per hour when passing the active 500 Hz magnet. And then at the 500 Hz magnet, you've got 153 meters to slow down to a speed of no faster than 25 km per hour, at which point you can then safely draw up to the stop signal. Let's now enter the Type U driving scenario for the final of the three scenarios demonstrating how to approach a red signal. So we're back on the Cologne to Koblenz route. I'm currently in the cab of the Virtual Railroads BR151 locomotive. I did just get a message that the traction motors were slightly overheating, so that might pop up while we're slowing down for this signal. I do hope that it doesn't, but that message can pop up more than once when driving this locomotive. So we're currently at the Vmax of 100 km per hour. You can see that the 55 lamp is illuminated on the dashboard, and we're now approaching the cautionary signal. So let's unpause at this point and approach the signal. I'm going to cut the power off now into idle. Now I'm getting ready to acknowledge the PZB. Now at this point we have 34 seconds at which to bring our speed to down below 55 km per hour. The brakes actually seem very effective in this, possibly more effective than they would be in real life. So we're bringing our speed down nicely now, and we're now down to 55 kilometers per hour. I've released the brakes momentarily. Once again, as with the previous scenarios, although I know the signal is going to be red, I'm pretending that I'm driving as if I don't, and so I'm looking ahead to see if I can see the signal changing. Of course, it is still at a red aspect at this point, and any moment now the 1000 Hertz lamp is going to extinguish. So that has now extinguished. The signal isn't changing, and I've got to have slowed to be going no faster than 40 kilometers per hour by the time we reach the 500 Hertz magnet. So we're now down to 40 kilometers per hour, and I'm sure that we're not going to get any brake applications now as we pass over the 500 Hertz magnet here. Just see the magnet coming up on the right of the track there, so now I'm going to continue to slow down because I need to be below 25 kilometers per hour within the next 153 meters. So we're now down below that speed, and we can now pull up to the signal safely, and we're not going to get any emergency brake applications from the PZB system. Now just applying some very light braking to bring our speed down further. And we can now comfortably come to a stop just here in front of the red signal. So we've now covered the 3 different ways that you would approach a red signal using the 3 different train types, Type O, Type M and Type U. I think most people drive Type O trains because passenger trains generally seem to be a bit more popular, and they're also faster of course as well, but there are certainly freight fans out there who want to know how to drive the Type M and Type U trains, which is something that wasn't covered in my previous signalling guide. So now let's just take a look at a couple more different ways of approaching the PZB system with certain signal aspects, and then we'll move on to the LZB system. Another state the PZB system can enter is known as restricted monitoring, usually when starting a scenario in Train Simulator, but it can also happen when under the control of active 1000 or 500 Hz PZB magnets. If you're under the control of a 1000 Hz or 500 Hz PZB magnet and travel below 10 km per hour for more than 15 seconds, or stop completely at any point, then 2 of the PZB lamps will flash alternately. This will introduce further speed restrictions, and you can only release from restricted monitoring if the signal ahead is clear or displays a speed limit above 30 km per hour and you are not under the control of a 500 Hz magnet. Under the control of a 1000 Hz magnet, restricted monitoring speed limits for trains of all types is 45 km per hour. Under the control of a 500 Hz magnet, Type O trains are permitted to travel at 45 km per hour but must slow to 25 km per hour within the next 153 meters. Type M and Type U trains are restricted to a constant 25 km per hour. When passing a signal warning of a restricted speed, such as a reduction to 60 km per hour, then you must press the PZB acknowledge key within 4 seconds, as this signal has an active 1000 Hz magnet. At this point, Type O trains must slow to 85 km per hour within the next 23 seconds, as with slowing for a stop signal, but then you can adjust your deceleration rate as you see fit to ensure that you are down to 60 km per hour in time for the next signal. Type M trains here would need to slow down to 70 km per hour within the next 26 seconds, and then you can adjust the deceleration rate as you see fit. Type U trains, with their PZB speed of 55 km per hour, would only need to slow to 60 km per hour within the next 34 seconds, as the signal Vmax is higher than the usual PZB speed reduction. If the speed change is to a speed limit higher than 85 km per hour, for example a drop in the speed limit from 160 to 120 km per hour as indicated by a warning signal, then the 1000 Hertz magnet will not be active and you will not need to acknowledge the warning. Just ensure that you have brought your train speed down to 120 km per hour by the next main signal. Please note that speed changes enforced by signals will not be marked on the HUD. On some routes, such as Konstanz to Villingen, you will encounter a permanent active 1000 Hertz magnet at any speed warning where the speed limit is going to drop to below 85 km per hour. Acknowledge the active PZB magnet and then follow the same rules as if you were approaching a signal speed restriction, ensuring that your train is down to the posted speed limit in time for passing the speed board. Whereas PZB signalling is a type of fixed block signalling system, LZB signalling is a type of what is known as a moving block signalling system. Instead of protecting a fixed area in front of the train like with PZB, LZB protects a certain distance range in front of the train, which varies depending upon the current speed. You will know when you're running on an LZB section of track due to the LZB wire which runs along the centre of the track between the rails. Back in the cab of the Virtual Railroads BR101 locomotive, let's now take a look at the various displays in use for the LZB system. In between the speedometer and the tractive effort brake force gauge, you can see the Lzb Distance Display. This displays the distance to the next speed change measured in hundreds of meters. It will show you any upcoming speed changes that are within the next 9.9 kilometers of track. The main display is a line which goes up to 4,000 meters and drops towards zero as you get closer to an upcoming speed restriction or signal restriction. If the distance of the upcoming restriction is more than 4,000 meters and below 9,900 meters, then a digital display above this will show you how far away the restriction is. If the restriction is above 9,900 meters away, then the digital display will continually read 9,900 meters until the upcoming restriction comes into range. The Lzb distance and speed monitor tells you about upcoming changes in the permanent speed restriction as well as changes in the signal speed restriction. Where a change is indicated, you do not have to acknowledge this, unlike with PZB. The U-lamp on the right of the display indicates that the LZB system is currently active. At the bottom of the speedometer, you will see a speed display which represents the LZB target speed. When a restriction is active on the distance display and the target speed is on the speedometer, you need to be down to this target speed before the distance display reaches zero. If the target speed on the speedometer reads 000, then you must stop the train at the next signal. The distance to this signal will be indicated on the Lzb distance display. Many German trains have a form of cruise control known as AFB. When driving with AFB active, then this can work with the LZB system to automatically manage any speed changes so that the driver does not have to brake for a reduction in the speed limit, as the train will do this automatically. Conversely, with the throttle open, if there is an increase in the speed limit, then the train can automatically accelerate up towards this new speed limit. The driver only has to control the rate of acceleration through the position of the throttle control. The B lamp on the display will illuminate if automatic braking is active when running under LZB mode. Of course, it could be that in reality the AFB system has failed, or it could be that you're driving an LZB equipped locomotive which does not have AFB installed. In this case, you will need to control all of these speed changes manually, ensuring that you are slowing down for signals or speed changes within an allotted braking curve. If you are not slowing down quick enough, then the red G lamp will illuminate on the dashboard, indicating that you are travelling faster than the braking curve allows. To correct this, you will need to brake harder to bring the train's speed down quicker. When reaching the end of an LZB section, the ender light will illuminate, and you will need to press the PZB acknowledge key on certain more advanced locomotives. Let's now jump into the first of the LZB driving scenarios that I wanted to go through. So we're currently in the cab of the Virtual Railroads BR101, travelling at the line speed of 200 km per hour on the Hamburg to Hanover route, and we're actually heading away from Hanover towards the first stop of Celle. Now there is a speed reduction coming up of 150 km per hour, as indicated by the target speed display in the speedometer, and also indicated by the distance display, which shows that this speed restriction is currently 4.1 km away. The AFB system at this point is switched off, so let's unpause it now and show you what you need to do when driving under LZB to slow down for an upcoming speed restriction. So I'm going to continue cruising along at 200 km per hour until the G lamp illuminates, indicating that I do need to then put on the brakes. So we're now 3 km away from the upcoming speed change. The G lamp has now illuminated, so I've just shut off the throttle, and I'm now going to apply the brakes to start bringing our speed down. As you can see now, we've now actually ended up with the G lamp extinguishing, which means that we're now below the braking curve to slow down for the upcoming speed restriction. So I've now released the brakes to demonstrate what happens, and so if I continued at that speed, you see there that the G lamp comes back on, indicating that we're not slowing down quite quick enough for the allotted braking curve. So the G lamp has now extinguished again, it's now come on again, and as you can see, it sort of comes on and off as you're trying to slow down, but just make sure that you don't stay at a speed that's too high above the braking curve for too long, or the system will kick in to force you to slow down. So we're actually now down below the target speed, but the G hasn't extinguished yet, and it won't extinguish now until we've actually passed the point of the speed change. So we've now passed the point of the speed change. You can see that the distance display has changed there, indicating that we're now 5 km away from the next speed change. And so that was the first driving scenario I wanted to show you, driving without AFB and managing a speed change. The next one I'm going to do now is we're going to jump back to the same point as where I started this scenario, this time with the AFB system switched on to show you what happens. So for driving scenario 2, we've now jumped back to 4.1 km away from the speed change down to 150 km per hour, and we're currently travelling at 200 km per hour, this time with the AFB system managing our speed. So I'm not going to give much more preamble this time, let's just get on with it, so I'll unpause it now, and let's just see what happens with the AFB system in relation to the speed change. Something I don't think I mentioned earlier was that we're actually able to travel faster under LZB mode because of the way it's set up, which is why we're able to travel at speeds of 200 km per hour plus when travelling under LZB. So the G lamps now come on. You can see that the power's now cut off according to the tractive effort and brake force gauge there. The system's not actually applying the brakes quite as early as I did to slow down for the upcoming speed change. We're now 2 km away from the speed change and the brakes are now on. The thing is that with the AFB system, unlike when I'm driving manually, it actually knows the exact braking curve that it needs to follow to bring our speed down, whereas I'm not quite so sure on that, so I'm going to tend to slow down a bit earlier than the AFB system does. So the speed is now coming down nicely. You can also see the little red bug on the outside of the speedometer, which is the AFB bug showing the speed that you've set it to if you're under PZB, but under LZB you can actually see the bug moving dynamically to slow us down to the maximum permitted speed. So we're now down to 150 km per hour. Power's now gone back on just to ensure that we don't end up losing speed at this point, to hold us at 150 km per hour. And so now we've looked at this second driving scenario, I just want to demonstrate approaching a red signal when driving under Lzb. So we're now in the cab of an ICE 3 unit on the Mannheim to Karlsruhe route, and I'm currently travelling at the line speed of 200 km per hour as we've left Karlsruhe heading towards Mannheim. At this point you can see that there's actually a green display there, a distance display, showing that we've got a speed change coming up in 3 kilometers, and you can see that there's 3 zeros on the target speed display, indicating that we need to stop as this is a red signal coming up. So if I now unpause the scenario at this point, let's show you what happens as we slow down for the red signal. Please bear in mind that the AFB system at this point is inactive as I've got it turned off. So the G has now come on. I've now put the brakes on to start bringing our speed down, to try and bring us down under the speed curve here. As you can see, the G lamp has now extinguished, so I can now reduce the braking slightly. And as you can see now, the signal's actually changed ahead for some reason, so we're now actually clear to continue accelerating. So I can now accelerate back up towards line speed. I say that, but for some reason now we've now got the signal warning again, so I'm not quite sure what happened there, whether the train ahead moved, or whether it's just a bug within Train Simulator with the signalling system. We're now 1 kilometer away from the upcoming red signal. Our speed's now 100 kilometers per hour, so I'm just going to reduce the brakes now until the G lamp comes back on, at which point I'll then reapply the brakes to bring our speed down for the upcoming red signal. In my previous signalling guide, I did cover approaching a red signal under Lzb mode, but unfortunately at the time I didn't realise that very often you might not be driving with AFB, and as a result of that you may need to stop manually. So I really wanted to cover manual approaches to red signals in this particular signalling guide. Of course, with the AFB system turned on, you will find that the train will actually stop at a red signal automatically. But I would recommend taking manual control of the brakes as you get closer to the red signal anyway. Can now see the red signal coming up. You can also see the red bug on the outside of the speedometer, which is actually the target speed. Though I've noticed that the G lamp comes on quite a bit before we've reached that point, so the G lamp comes on before the target speed has reached our current speed. And now just coasting towards the signal for a moment, just allowing us to slow down a bit more gently here. And now I'm going to reapply the brakes to make sure that our speed is under the Lzb target speed there. And we can now draw up safely in front of the signal. I hope that with all of the information included in this video you now have a much better understanding of how to operate trains utilising the PZB and Lzb signalling system. This tutorial was a lot more comprehensive than my previous one and covered the most common situations you may encounter when driving on German or Austrian routes within Train Simulator. So at this point I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest channel updates, you can find the link to my Facebook page in the video description. And if you'd like to sponsor this channel on Patreon, then you can find the link to my Patreon page also in the video description. Once again, thank you for watching.